Hello and welcome to Parking Lot Conversations. I'm Jerry Tucker and I'm here with
Tim Jeske,
Elka Failer,
Matthew Hardaway,
and also our special guest Stephanie Classen is still with us. Say hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh,
okay, guys. So people have been asking me, what are your plans for next week? And so I have to respond.
and alive.
So yeah, I'm like the Bee Gees. I want to stay alive. A couple of other things that's been going on. I tell you, I told my wife how thankful I was to have someone I enjoyed being quarantined with, and she said it must be nice.
Yeah.
Oh, good one, Kendra. Good one. I like that.
Yeah, I almost sent that one in Messenger the other day.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Stephanie,
So anyway,
send him your card.
Say that again.
Stephanie's going to be sending you her card, Jerry.
Oh, okay.
That's your service.
Definitely need that card, Stephanie. Maybe we can hang on after the show and do a little one-on-one Zoom meeting here.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So anyway, how are you guys doing?
We're doing pretty good. We're
baby.
hanging in there. Yeah.
Good.
I'm
Good.
coming to you guys from the silos today.
Tim's
Nice.
live from the silos.
And where's
thirsty.
Matthew at?
Oh,
I'm thirsty. I have to get some water. Wait, where'd it go? There we go.
There we
Yes.
It doesn't quite work.
Oh, so fun with the Zoom meetings today.
There we
So
go.
good.
That's
No, we figured
disappearing
out the
mug.
settings.
Yeah.
There we go. Filled up. All right.
So
Figured out the
what's
settings.
going on, guys? What are we going to talk about today?
So, Tim, we're going to let him start off today. He's got a great question. So, Timothy, it's all
Tim.
you.
What's up, guys? So, yeah, I was just thinking about something. You know, as we watched the news, we had talked about it earlier in the previous vodka episode.
Vodcast.
Vodcast. Y'all
This
haven't
whole
been
time you
drinking-
thought she was saying vodka episode?
Y'all haven't been drinking vodka the whole time?
I did
That's what Matt
wonder.
has in his cup.
I was wondering why Elka said vodcast and not a vidcast.
Yeah.
I thought
I-
we were
there's
drinking
that.
vodka.
Vodcast. So, vodcast. Vidcast just doesn't have the same ring to it.
Yeah.
Now we know where the vodka stuff came from.
Yeah.
So anyways, no, just thinking about and drawing on my personal experiences of being a professional emergency manager in a previous time, and having worked on some of these plans as we're going through this pandemic together, this time of trouble together, facing the coronavirus, COVID-19, and just kind of understanding what could be the reality of this might have to get worse before it starts getting better. And so as we talk about the news and we talk about what we're seeing and how we're restricted and things like that, understanding that it may go on longer than we want it to. The things we see on the news and God forbid experience maybe even here locally may be worse than what we're experiencing now before it gets better. And kind of, brought us to the question, what can we do today to help us get ready to process and prepare for that, what could be reality of more hardship and more pain ahead. And so Stephanie, as we talk about this, as adults looking for a way to help us maybe cope and understand and come to be okay with that realization that maybe some pain lies ahead, and what can we do about that?
Sure. A couple of things to think about. I think right now we're developing what I like to call grit. We're just developing some skills of, the way I like to think about it, before this all happened, if I had one thing canceled, I got a little annoyed. Well, now that's a piece of cake if one thing gets canceled. I've developed some grit, but what we're going through now maybe will become the easy thing here in a few months. So developing that grit, looking for stories in history too, for people that have been through very traumatic things but came to another side of it.
Right.
Looking for examples of people who have gone through some compounded grief, and maybe they lost a whole nation, or maybe they lost a whole friend group, and how did they get to the other side? we don't know what we're going to face. We may face a whole lot of grief, but the social connection that we can have through Zoom calls, through FaceTime calls, we're going to need that. We're going to need that to get through some of these days ahead.
Yeah, I think that's an important reminder for all of us that, you know, even though we are separated to some degree, we do still have that blessing of technology that allows us to have some togetherness. And maybe it's not what we're used to, but it's a whole lot better than, like you said, people in history that weren't able to be connected in that way. I know my own grandparents talked about when they were living through the war and being completely disconnected from their entire families and not knowing for months if they were even alive, you know, whether or not they would see them again. And you know, they came out for the better of it, and it was hard, but they pursued what they knew they needed to do and found themselves jobs and found new places to live. And they walked away from that with that grit that you were talking about. And also this really deep love for life, because they had so much taken away from them. And so I think, you know, even though, yes, this is a scary time we're living in, if we can kind of grasp to those things that we know we're going to get from this, that we're going to benefit from, then, you know, it's a little bit easier to deal with all the scary stuff that we hear in the news.
I was reminded of about the time we started doing these podcasts, shortly thereafter, went to Guatemala with Elka and came back with a busted quad tendon. Thank you, Elka.
Hey, that was the invisible Guatemalan ninja.
Invisible, yeah,
came it was through and
yes, I
kicked
didn't
him.
realize. Next time I'm checking Elka's luggage to make sure the ninja costume's not stowed away in there. No, but went down to Guatemala. Wasn't my first trip down. Kind of knew what to expect. I developed some grit with that. Suffered a leg injury and came back and needed surgery and rehab, but finally finished the rehab. But I can remember like getting, I don't know, 3 months into the rehab and getting discouraged. You hit this plateau, you hit this spot where it doesn't feel like you're progressing. I'm in the middle of something I know is going to take about 6 to 7 months. I already know that. I can already envision that. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what it's going to mean. But right now, I'm frustrated to no end because I can't get my knee to do what I feel like it really should be able to do. And my PT guy looked at me and said, Matthew, just remember where you were 2 months ago. It's like, oh, 2 months ago, I wasn't even allowed to bend my leg, like, because I had to let the surgery heal. Now I can bend my leg. Oh, now I'm walking on it. Now I'm using a cane instead of crutches. And so we're developing grit, I think, is a great way of looking at this. But sometimes even in the midst of developing grit, maybe it's helpful to look back at some of the grit we already have that maybe we've forgotten about. Maybe we didn't realize we have. Maybe the last time I had to go through this, I really disliked it. And so I don't really think about it all that much. But if I stop for a second and go, oh, okay, kind of done this before, and I can get through this. Almost like getting, well, no, I don't want to say that. Oh, no, I'll go ahead and say it. Sinus infection. Like, okay. And so you get to where your nose is constantly running. You've got a cough that won't go away. I'm not trying to say this to make light of the coronavirus, because that's a completely different thing. But I can't tell you the number of times in my lifetime, because of a little sniffle, I get frustrated because I can't remember what it was like to not need a Kleenex every 5 minutes. But then it's like, I don't know, a week later, I don't even realize I don't need Kleenex anymore. So sometimes in the middle of we get overwhelmed and frustrated. It's helpful to look back and say, okay, I've either gone through something like this before and it's gotten better. And what did I do then? Okay, I use these skills. I use these resources. Right now, it's something for a lot of us that's new. There's no way to go back and say, oh, well, in 1918, when I went through the Spanish flu with everybody else, this is what I did. But like Tim was saying earlier, we can look back at what people did in 1918. In 1918, St. Louis released restrictions or lifted restrictions prior to everybody else and saw a massive spike in people getting sick. And then they went, oops, shouldn't have done that. We got to go back to shelter in place or quarantine or, back to using carrier pigeons and all that good stuff. I don't know what it was like in 1918. My grandma wasn't even born yet.
Well, one thing that I do have a question on that I know some of my friends and I have been talking about is that as parents, not ever having dealt with anything like this in our lifetime, it can be a little bit scary for us as adults. How do we talk to our kids about these things without scaring them?
Sure. I think honesty is important, but honesty with breaks, with filters,
Okay.
with depending on not only the age of your children, but the emotional age of your children. You know, just because
Yeah, that's
somebody's
key.
13, that looks different for a lot of different people. So talk to your kids at their emotional age. Check in with them. You know, open-ended questions are great. What you've just learned on the news, what we've just talked about, how does that make you feel? What questions do you have about it? How does that scare you? Those open-ended questions can be really helpful.
So you said talk to them at their emotional age.
Correct.
That explains a lot for me. My mom still talks to me like I'm a baby. It's weird.
Did something just click, Tim?
Right.
Oh, now don't
hey.
make sense.
I saw him light up. He goes, I understand now.
Light bulb moment.
Well, now we know why the four of us get along so well.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. Exactly. We're
Right, but
all
what
stuck
do you
at the
do
same
if-
emotional age.
But what do you do if your 13-year-old's emotional age is greater than yours?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
that's a
man.
great question.
Wow.
I will say that one thing for our family is that we are on a totally different schedule than we've ever been on. This has kicked us into homeschooling that we've never dealt with before. Paul, who is 9, he's used to being at home and having relaxation time, not school time. So having to focus on school is a lot harder than what it was before. How can we kind of maintain some normalcy in our routines amidst all this?
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to say is give yourself grace, because this is not going to look perfect. I mean, we've got to recognize when we're doing a good job. It's not going to be a perfect job. So that's step one, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that makes me feel better already.
Yes.
Good.
I had grace from the beginning, so I knew that this was not going to be perfect.
Good. Good. You know, and then if you can have a general guideline, we posted this COVID-19 schedule on our refrigerator. We are not going by it exactly, but what I've gained from it is try to have a time during the day where you stick to some normal routines. We were in a normal routine of breakfast together, so we've kept that up, okay? And then we're going to have an educational time at the house. We're going to have a recreational time at the house. And that's because my family, we used to have our recreation elsewhere. It wasn't typically at home, but we still need to have fun.
Yeah.
So it's almost in the schedule. This is the fun time. So we're going to play a game. We're going to tell jokes. We're going to watch a funny movie. You know, try to stick to somewhat of a schedule. You know, we all need rest. Now, it doesn't have to be the typical 8 o'clock bedtime that you may stick to when life is normal, but we still need, you know, kids need about 9-ish hours of rest. So if they're staying up till midnight, make sure that they're sleeping in, because if we get exhausted, none of us emotionally deal very well. So it's not as much about the rigidness as it is about the idea behind it. So 8 o'clock bedtime is there so that when your kids have to get up early for school, they have that amount of rest. So that
And we
can be
also know, so within a family unit, some individuals in the family might need that rigid schedule. One person might need to be in bed by 9 o'clock, 9:30, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else does. So now you have to work together to make sure if you're staying up because life is different. Today's an off day on the schedule. We're going to stick around and watch a movie a little bit later. We want to play video games. We want to read a little bit longer. We can do that, but we need to honor the fact that somebody else is sleeping. But then on the flip side, the next morning, when that other person's ready to get up and get moving, okay, great. You're ready to get up and get moving, but everybody else needs some time to sleep. And, you know,
right. And just working together as a whole system, as a family. I can think of one of the families I'm working with. They're letting their children stay up really late so that they'll sleep in. And then the parents set an early alarm to get a lot of focused work done since they're working from home while the kids are still sleeping. So that's how they make it work as a system.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that idea. Maybe I should incorporate that.
I think I'm going to share that idea with my wife. If you let me stay up really late and sleep in late, you'd be able to get a lot more done in the morning.
There you go. There you go. Just work it together.
I like the idea of recreation time. It's important that you add in a little bit of what mind-numbing recreation I like to call it. Just get away from what you're used to or what the norm is, and so like we get together. We've been playing some card games, learning new games. That's
Right.
a good thing. Like look up. Obviously, with our technology, we can look up new card games that you can play as a group and learn new games, or play the same old game you've played always, but add a twist to it or something. So be creative with your time and try different things.
I think the other question that a lot of our parents have, and kids too, is because we are spending so much more time together, and a lot of us are a little bit more stressed than maybe we normally would be. Obviously, tension starts to rise. I know with my siblings, they're fighting maybe a little bit more than they would be because they're just not used to being around each other as much. How do you deal
children,
with
right?
that? Yes.
Your children, not your siblings.
Yes. My kids who are siblings, sorry. But yeah, how do you deal with that like added pressure of just being around each other 24/7 when we're not really used to that as a society anymore?
This is real. Well, first I'm going to say let's keep ourselves safe. I heard in San Antonio just this week, domestic violence calls were up like 20%. So this is a thing. People are spending a lot of time together. We got to keep ourselves safe. I remember back to when I had infants, you would always hear, if they're frustrating you, walk out of the room, put them in the crib, walk away. If your family members are frustrating you, walk away, walk out of the house, go take a walk down the street. Going back to that COVID-19 schedule, there is a piece in there of alone time, right? So yes, family time is great, but even put in the schedule, we need time. Maybe everybody's in their room doing their own thing for a while. We need breaks from each other because we as families are typically not used to being together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So taking those breaks is helpful. Remembering we are going to get annoyed with each other, okay? And we can still love somebody when we're annoyed with them, but we may need to take a break a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, that's a key. Well, that's awesome, Stephanie. We can't thank you enough for all of your help here and going through all these questions with us, because I think that for all of us, it's important, like you said, that we are able to kind of reach out and ask each other for help and support. And what a great way to get that. So thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, guys. Well, we will hopefully get back with y'all soon with another show. We've got lots more questions to address, so just keep checking back. And if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that today.
And you can also subscribe to our podcast. You look that up for Parking Lot Conversations. And wherever you find us, Instagram, Facebook, we're now on YouTube, obviously, with these shows. Still leave us your questions. If you've got something you'd like for us to talk about, we'd love to hear that from you.
All right, guys.
See y'all later. Hopefully not too close to go.